In the late days of 2018, as holiday lights flickered across neighborhoods, Cheryl Bart felt a cold dread settling in her chest. She hadn't heard from her 29-year-old daughter, Kelsey, since Thanksgiving. This silence was uncharacterable. Kelsey always kept her informed despite juggling work demands and raising her daughter, Kay. Gripped by mounting anxiety, Cheryl contacted authorities and requested a welfare check on her daughter. Officers arrived at Kelsey's residence in Woodland Park, Colorado, discovering her vehicle parked outside. Inside the dwelling, there were indications that Kelsey had departed abruptly. Unwashed dishes cluttered the kitchen, uneaten food sat abandoned, and her personal belongings like clothing and bags remained untouched. However, her phone and wallet had vanished. There were no signs of forced entry or violence, but a missing person report was filed and information about Kelsey began to circulate. The last time Cheryl had spoken with her daughter was on the morning of November 22, Thanksgiving Day. Kelsey was in bright spirits, baking cinnamon buns, and was about to go grocery shopping for the holiday dinner. That same day, Kelsey went to a Safeway supermarket with Kay. She texted her fiancé Patrick Furzy that she had bought sweet potatoes and was going to make a casserole if he wanted to join them for dinner. After that, no one saw her again. Patrick, to whom Kelsey was engaged, lived on his mother, Sheila's ranch. Authorities contacted him to gather details about Kelsey's recent life events. He claimed that Kelsey had actually broken up with him the day before Thanksgiving. According to him, they could no longer coexist peacefully, but they agreed on joint custody of their daughter, Kay. Patrick said that after the breakup, they met in an alley where Kelsey handed over their daughter to him. He also returned some of Kay's belongings to her. Then he took the girl to his ranch to celebrate Thanksgiving, but Kelsey didn't come. Patrick claimed they continued to communicate, though not as often. He showed investigators a text exchange where, for example, he asked, "Are you awake?" and received a reply from Kelsey. "Sorry, didn't hear the phone. Going to shower. We'll call you later." He also sent her a message, "If this is really what you want, I respect your wish and will give you space." Investigators began to question his story because Kelsey's behavior showed no signs of an intention to end the relationship. A week before she had been discussing wedding dresses with her mother and preparing food for a family dinner. Kelsey met Patrick in 2016 through a dating site. He lived on a 35-acre ranch where he trained hunting dogs and cared for horses and donkeys. Kelsey had always loved spending time outdoors and their shared interests brought them closer. In October 2017, their daughter Kay was born. However, despite the birth of their child and their engagement, they continued to live separately. Kelsey lived in Woodland Park while Patrick lived with his mother on the ranch, and Kelsey didn't want to move there until it was just her, Patrick, and their daughter living together. The relationship between Kelsey and Patrick deteriorated with each passing month. Kelsey confided in friends that it was hard for her to maintain the relationship and simultaneously cope with her duties as a mother. Patrick refused to visit her and Kelsey felt his interest in their relationship fading. She also suspected that Patrick might be communicating with his ex-girlfriend but wasn't sure. These thoughts weighed on her. As news of Kelsey's disappearance spread, her friends and family organized a vigil in Washington to draw attention to her disappearance. Investigators continued to gather information and questions mounted. Why did Kelsey suddenly decide to break off the relationship if she had recently discussed wedding plans with her mother? Patrick claimed that Kelsey was emotionally unstable, and possibly suffering from depression. He even hinted at the possibility of her taking her own life, trying to explain her disappearance. Kelsey's friends confirmed that she was engrossed in caring for her daughter and working, but they did not notice any signs of depression or suicidal intent in her. She was a flight instructor and loved her job, which gave her the opportunity to travel and spend time outdoors, which always brought her joy. Kelsey was a simple country girl who loved tractors and agriculture, and her life values were always connected with nature and freedom. However, her dreams of a happy family gradually disappeared. Kelsey increasingly noticed that Patrick was not taking initiative in the relationship, and despite her attempts to save the family, their plans for the future reached a dead end. She did not want to live with his mother, and Patrick was not going to change his living situation. This became one of the key factors leading to their breakup. Law enforcement officers searched Kelsey's home and both of her cars, but no obvious signs of a struggle or forced entry were found. At this stage, the disappearance was classified as a missing person case, and the police had to appeal to the public for help and information. None of Kelsey's acquaintances could believe that she would voluntarily leave her daughter for such a long time. The theory of rehabilitation due to illicit substances was also rejected, as none of her friends or close ones knew of any substance problems or depression. Suspicions began to creep in. A few days before her disappearance, Kelsey informed her boss that Patrick would be attending a corporate holiday party. Her message contained exclamation marks and emojis emphasizing her enthusiasm. After the disappearance, Patrick did not participate in any way. He did not attend press conferences or candlelight vigils, nor did he call to inquire about the investigation's progress. Cheryl and Kelsey's brother, Clint, began their own investigation. They decided to return to Kelsey's house to personally check if there was anything that could explain her disappearance. Upon entering the house, they immediately felt the heat. The heating was on full blast. Cinnamon buns baked on Thanksgiving morning were on the table, and dishes were left unwashed. However, what alarmed them was that the refrigerator looked like it had recently been wiped down. Smudges were visible on its surface. They also noticed that the bath mat was missing, and Clint saw blood-like stains on the toilet. Cheryl immediately called investigators. This time they came with luminol and a dog trained to find bodies. After processing the premises, traces of blood were found, which after DNA analysis confirmed it was Kelsey's blood. The lead investigator noted that Kelsey's behavior before her disappearance did not fit the theory that she might have left voluntarily. She was a proud mother, cared for her child, and had never gone missing before. The FBI joined the investigation, and reports of the disappearance and a $225,000 reward for information that could help in the investigation appeared in the press. But suspicions increasingly focused on Patrick, especially after surveillance camera footage from neighbors showed that on the day of Kelsey's disappearance, Patrick appeared at her house twice. The first time he came with Kelsey and their daughter, Kay. However, a few hours later, cameras again recorded him, but this time alone. The quality of the recording did not allow for a precise determination of whether he was arriving or leaving. However, his presence did not match the version he initially told investigators. The situation became increasingly confusing. Despite the lack of obvious clues, Patrick became the prime suspect. From the very beginning, he claimed to have met Kelsey in an alley where she handed him the child. However, now video recordings prove that he was lying. Police increasingly doubted his innocence, especially when it became clear that Patrick was avoiding all contact with the public and showed no interest in the fate of his fiancée. The investigation progressed, and each new fact only confirmed that Kelsey could not have disappeared voluntarily. On the fourth day after the missing person report, investigators announced that they were close to a breakthrough. New data emerged in the case, leading to the conclusion that Kelsey might have been murdered. Patrick remained in focus as the only person who could have been involved in her disappearance, but there was no direct evidence yet. Every detail in this case suggested that Kelsey's disappearance was carefully planned. Patrick, despite announcing a breakup, continued to be near Kelsey in her last days. Contacts with her colleagues and superiors also did not indicate problems in her personal life or an intention to disappear. It seemed that Kelsey's entire life was cut short suddenly and without any apparent reason. Cheryl and Clint did not give up, continuing to press and trying to find answers to their questions. They were convinced that Kelsey could not have abandoned her daughter and simply disappeared. The entire house in which she lived literally screamed that something had gone wrong. The heating turned up full blast. The freshly cleaned refrigerator, the disappeared bath mat. All of this spoke of attempts to cover up traces. The blood stains found in the house only confirmed their worst fears. With each passing day, it became clearer that Kelsey's story was not just a missing person case, but a much darker and more frightening mystery. Patrick, the man who claimed to love her, became the main suspect, and the police increasingly focused on his actions. His strange behavior and false testimony led investigators to believe that he was hiding something and that something might be related to Kelsey's disappearance. By this point, Kelsey's case had become a real ordeal for both the police and her family. Despite all efforts, investigators still couldn't find an answer to the main question. What happened to Kelsey on the day she stopped communicating? When Woodland Park police returned to Patrick's home for another routine check, they noticed that excavation work was being carried out on the property. Using drones, they recorded these changes, but Kelsey's body was still not found. Investigators continued to interact with Patrick without taking active steps to detain him, and the ongoing investigation remained a mystery to the press and public. In parallel, the Evidence Collection Task Force turned its attention to Kelsey's home. Searches were conducted and police officers removed several brown bags. However, what exactly was inside was not disclosed. It was obvious that investigators were in the analysis and verification stage of the collected evidence. Soon, one of Crystal's friends approached the police with important information. She stated that Crystal had shared details with her that could influence the course of the investigation. According to her, Patrick once told Crystal that he needed to deal with the mother of his child. Both women interpreted this as a suggestion to get rid of Kelsey. Phone data became one of the important elements of this case. Information from Kelsey's phone showed that her device was near Patrick's phone for several days after her disappearance. The last signals from Kelsey's phone were recorded in Idaho, and messages were sent from there to Patrick, her boss, and her mother, Cheryl. It soon became clear that these messages were not sent by Kelsey, but by Crystal, as they used the same cell towers near her residence. Police searched huge tracts of land connected to Patrick as part of a warrant obtained on December 14. A warrant was also issued to check his phone. These activities revealed an important contact. A number that caught the attention of investigators belonged to a woman named Crystal Lee Kenny, a nurse living in Idaho. Crystal denied knowing Patrick, stating that she had only been to his place to buy horses. However, it turned out that she and Patrick had been in a long-term but unstable relationship for over 10 years. Crystal's ex-husband confirmed this, adding that after their divorce, the relationship between Crystal and Patrick strengthened. Meanwhile, investigators began to analyze the motives that could have prompted Patrick to disappear Kelsey. According to Crystal, Patrick often described Kelsey as a bad mother and an addict, claiming he wanted to save his daughter and gain full custody of her. At the same time, he was in a difficult financial situation, overdue on a $72,000 loan payment and had not paid child support to Kelsey since July. Moreover, Patrick was the beneficiary of a recently arranged life insurance policy for Kelsey, which increased suspicion of his possible involvement in her disappearance. Investigators again approached Crystal, presenting her with all the collected evidence, and then she decided to tell the truth. Crystal confessed that she and Patrick had maintained an intermittent affair for many years and that Patrick had asked her to kill Kelsey. Initially, he suggested she poison Kelsey by adding poison to her coffee and handing it to her, pretending to be a stranger. When that plan didn't work, Patrick tried to convince Crystal to beat Kelsey to death. Faced with the pressure of the evidence, Crystal agreed to cooperate with the investigation, but made a condition. She would plead guilty to a lesser crime, namely tampering with evidence, which would carry a maximum of 3 years in prison. Investigators accepted her offer and Crystal showed them Kelsey's home where they found a lot of evidence including blood stains on the floor, walls, and appliances. This was confirmed. Meanwhile, police continued to search for Kelsey's body, but it was never found. The question of the affair between Patrick and Crystal and its possible connection to Kelsey's disappearance remained open. Investigators were in the process of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, trying to understand if Patrick's personal motives and financial problems were indeed the cause of the tragedy. The police press service stated that the investigation was progressing, but did not reveal specific details. Excavations near Patrick's home and the collection of evidence in Kelsey's home suggested that the investigation was nearing a conclusion, but concrete answers were still to be found. The police still did not detain Patrick, but continued to communicate with him, seeking new clues and trying to gather enough evidence for an indictment. Crystal, in turn, was ready to testify against Patrick, which could be a key step in solving the case. The investigation was working around the clock to find out what really happened to Kelsey and what role Patrick and Crystal played in it. Patrick Frazee was arrested on December 21 and charged with first-degree murder, solicitation to commit murder, and 6 other crimes. He pleaded not guilty. During the investigation, Kelsey's case attracted the attention of police and FBI agents who actively worked on it in Colorado and other states. Investigators methodically searched Kelsey's home for additional clues and actively monitored Patrick. On Friday morning after his arrest, Patrick appeared in court via video link and police continued to look for new evidence. This case caused a stir, but no one from Kelsey's family was present in the courtroom. Back in November 2018, events unfolded rapidly. On November 22, Kelsey was in constant contact with Patrick. Calls and messages were recorded between their phones starting at 1 a.m. At 9:37 a.m., Kelsey sent Patrick a message, after which they spoke briefly on the phone. She told him about preparing Thanksgiving dinner and was going to the supermarket. Later, Patrick claimed they broke up after a short meeting where Kelsey handed him their daughter, Kay. However, this was not their last meeting. Patrick's and Kelsey's cell phones connected to the same cell tower throughout the day, from 1 p.m. until 4:30 p.m. At 1:24 p.m., Patrick was seen entering Kelsey's house with her. Then, according to Crystal, Patrick blindfolded Kelsey under the pretext of guessing a candle scent, then grabbed a bat and began to strike her. He beat her to death. At that moment, their young daughter was in another room. Kelsey's last words, as Patrick later claimed, were, "Please stop." After the murder, Patrick drove his daughter to Walmart to refuel the car and then returned to Kelsey's house. He was seen near the house around 3:30 p.m. and then called his mother, Sheila, and Crystal, telling the latter that she needed to come to Colorado to clean up the mess. Crystal understood that Kelsey had been murdered and that she needed to clean the house. She gathered bleach, gloves, and set off on a 13-hour drive from Idaho to Colorado. Patrick, having finished the conversation, placed Kelsey's body in a plastic container and went to his ranch to temporarily hide it. Both phones were still connecting to the same cell towers while he transported the body. After that, he returned home to celebrate Thanksgiving dinner with his daughter and family. When Crystal arrived at Kelsey's house, she spent several hours cleaning. According to her, she deliberately left some blood stains so that Patrick would eventually be caught and the truth would come out. She also put detergent in the washing machine with towels, although she was asked to wash everything. After that, she and Patrick went to his ranch. Returning to Patrick's home, they took a bag with them. Patrick made 19 calls and sent many messages from both phones pretending to be Kelsey. Then they put the bag in a large trough with 5 gallons of gasoline and watched everything burn. Crystal added Kelsey's Bible and some of Kay's toys. Patrick's mother, Sheila, watched from the side. She later became an important witness in the case. Crystal also took a pistol and Kelsey's phone to continue creating a false impression by sending text messages. Patrick asked her to take the pistol to create the illusion that Kelsey might have been going to commit suicide. Crystal destroyed Kelsey's phone and Patrick panicked and went to Arizona to see if data could be recovered from the inoperable phone. Later, Patrick and Crystal discussed the container. Crystal described it as aluminum, round, and bottomless. She parked it on the property and went out to talk to Patrick. At that moment, Patrick handed her Kelsey's phone and gave instructions on what to do with it. When Patrick lit the fire, Crystal was nearby helping to collect firewood and put it into the fire pit. Patrick used gasoline and motor oil to start the flame. Patrick's mother, Sheila, came out and stood on the terrace, watching what was happening. Crystal recalled Sheila coming out from behind 2 trees and heading towards the house. The events related to Kelsey's murder became known thanks to Crystal's testimony and cell phone data, which allowed the police to reconstruct the timeline of events in early March and strengthen the evidence against Patrick. All these actions and details led to the case becoming increasingly convincing, and soon Patrick Frazie's arrest followed. Patrick Frazie's trial began in October 2019, almost a year after his fiancée Kelsey's disappearance. Photography and live reporting were prohibited during the court sessions, and security measures were increased. The jury heard testimony from key witnesses, including Crystal Lee Kenny, who had previously pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence, and an inmate who had been in the same cell as Patrick. Patrick passed notes on toilet paper to the inmate, asking for help to get rid of people who knew what was happening. These notes mentioned Crystal, her friend, and Kelsey's mother, Cheryl. He wanted all of them to disappear and remain invisible until a certain date, and expressed a desire for Crystal to be killed within a few hours. After the trial began, the jury unanimously found Patrick Frisk guilty of murdering his fiancée Kelsey and on all charges presented. Patrick was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, as well as 3 consecutive terms of 48 years for 3 counts of solicitation to commit murder and 12 years for tampering with the body. In total, he received a life sentence and an additional 150 years in prison. The judge noted that Patrick's actions were brutal and senseless. After beating his fiancée, he burned her body like trash. The judge emphasized that such a crime deserved the harshest punishment provided by law. Crystal Lee was sentenced to 3 years in prison and 1 year of probation. This was the maximum sentence demanded by the victim's family. Prosecutor Dan May stated that the deal with Crystal was like a deal with the devil, but was necessary to put Patrick behind bars. However, he believed that Crystal received too lenient a sentence. Nurse Crystal Lee Kenny pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence in January of the same year, aiding Patrick Frisk. Kenny cooperated with the investigation and testified against Frisk, becoming a key prosecution witness. According to some sources, Crystal and Patrick had a romantic relationship, and her family claimed that she participated in this only due to threats from Patrick. On the day of the trial, Kenny was released, but prison awaited her. The lead investigator with 37 years of experience was glad that Crystal provided answers to some questions. However, her confession did not change the fact that Kelsey's body was never found. Crystal claimed that Patrick burned the body, and the investigator had to tell Kelsey's parents this. Patrick's parents, Sheila and her husband, also had to experience shock. Sheila was detained but not arrested, and later the court held an emergency hearing on the custody of Kelsey's daughter Kay. Patrick's parents tried to obtain custody, but the court ruled that Kay should stay with her grandmother Cheryl, Kelsey's mother. If Crystal's testimony was true, and Sheila indeed saw her son burn Kelsey's body, then the court's decision to leave the child with Cheryl was justified. Patrick, according to many of Kelsey's friends, did not surprise them with his actions. His ex-girlfriend, Vanessa, claimed that Patrick had always been able to manipulate people and had a sharp mind. Their relationship, which began with mutual attraction, quickly turned emotionally abusive and controlling. They finally broke up in 2014 when Vanessa realized that his behavior perfectly matched the description of a psychopath. She believed that Crystal fell under Patrick's influence just as she herself once did. Vanessa also claimed that Patrick was a complex person who knew how to exploit people's weaknesses. Unanswered questions remained on the agenda. Despite Crystal's testimony, the investigator was mentally preparing to talk to Kelsey's parents and hoped he could find her body. However, upon learning that the body had been burned, the investigator found it difficult to realize that he had to deliver this news to Kelsey's parents, Cheryl and her husband. Prosecutor Dan May, after Crystal Lee's sentencing, expressed dissatisfaction with her lenient punishment. According to him, Crystal Lee did not even serve her full sentence. He planned to appeal to the legislature to fight against attempts to increase the number of good deeds that can reduce a prison term. May also compared the deal with Crystal to a deal with the devil, but acknowledged it as a necessary measure to send Patrick to prison. Kelsey's remains were never found. In the small town of Woodland Park on that Thanksgiving Day, an event occurred that left a dark mark on the town's history. Residents tried to do everything possible to erase this trace, for him to understand how a person could do such a thing and not go to the police. For him, it remained a mystery. One of the detectives also added that he doesn't have pictures of victims in his office, but he remembers all his victims, especially in cases like this. Kelsey was one of those he would remember for a long time. He couldn't understand why Patrick acted the way he did. How a person, whether Patrick or someone else, could be so cruel to the mother of his child. The district attorney and another officer noted that unfortunately they never met Kelsey in person, but wished they could have under different circumstances. They knew that working in the aviation industry or the military is not easy for a woman. But Kelsey succeeded. She was a respected and valued employee, and feedback from colleagues and students showed what a wonderful person she was. She was devoted not only to her daughter but also to her country. All people involved in the investigation, including FBI employees, the prosecution, and other agencies, truly cared about her. Patrick Friss, convicted of murder, tried to appeal his conviction, but in 2023, his petition was denied. The lead investigator acknowledged that Crystal made serious mistakes, but the justice they achieved would have been impossible without her help. The events that occurred on that Thanksgiving Day left their mark, and the town tried to move forward, gradually restoring not only Kelsey's home, but also its reputation. Like, comment and subscribe to True Crime Angle.